Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, students. Welcome to the third lecture on this TETFL 2 course. So students, in the last lecture we talked about role of a teacher, and particularly in a language class. Today we are moving on to different stages, right, of an oral lesson, right? So before we move on to this lecture, as usual, we need to review the last lecture that we talked about. So what did we do in the lecture, students? Yes, we talked about role of a teacher, particularly in a language class, and I hope you remember we discussed that motivational role of a teacher is very important in a language class, right? Students can only enjoy learning a language if they are motivated, and the teacher plays a very important role in motivating the students for this language learning in the process. And how can a teacher motivate? There are various factors that can help a teacher motivate the students. So one of the role was, if you remember, personality of the teacher. That the teacher, now what is personality? Again, the personality is what? The sum total of nature and nurture. So here the personality means that how the teacher appears, right? And again, personality covers how the teacher behaves in the class, how the teacher talks in the class, how the teacher displays his loyalty for the organization, integrity for the profession, and above all, how he manages his teaching, that the core job that the teacher is supposed to perform. If the teacher is in fact honest in his profession, and if he does whatever he is supposed to do, so these things motivate the students. And on the other hand, we saw that if the teacher in fact fails to manage all these things, so obviously the students get demotivated. So personal hygiene of the teacher is also important. The dress code of the teacher is very important. Politeness of a teacher is very important. And at the same time, right, he should know how to exercise the power, how to manage the class. So that is what I mean. We talked about these were some of the factors that can help a teacher, a good language teacher, in motivating his students. Another role was informant. That the teacher, from the word inform, he should have enough information on whatever he is going to present, right? And then, being an informant, a good teacher knows, right, that the topic, that the concept which was discussed yesterday in the previous lecture, and how this topic, the topic that is going to be discussed is linked with the previous topic. So extended knowledge from the previous one. And again, a teacher, in fact, what he does, he repeats things, right, students? So repetition is also important, because once a teacher keeps on repeating things, so what happens? Yes, these repetitions in fact help student learn more, right? And the students remain in the know, right? And they try to in fact keep on learning, and this process never stops. And definitely when the teacher repeats a lot, the students also take notes, and you see, they try to interact. So the learning process, or particularly the language learning process, obviously improves. So informant, of course, another important role of a good teacher, right, students? So then we talked about conductor, right? So a good language teacher is a good conductor. He in fact conducts the class in an excellent way. So while conducting, what does he do? He in fact monitors things, right? He sees what is going on in the class, and he keeps a check on all the pairs, if it is a pair work activity in the class, or right, if it is a group work going on. So he keeps on monitoring things, right? He in fact knows which activity is underway and which group is doing which activity. So this comes under the role of the teacher, the language teacher, that he needs to be a good conductor of a class, right? And again we discussed that the teacher in fact knows the pulses of his students, right? He in fact diagnoses the students' problems, and after diagnosing he in fact put them in a place. After diagnosing the student, he in fact tries to overcome the weak areas of his learners. If he feels that his learners are weak in speaking skill, so he in fact designs activities to help improve speaking skills of his students. Or if he feels that his learners in fact need basic knowledge, right, basic information, so he begins from that level. If he feels that his learners are good at some basic things, so he starts from where of course he in fact needs to start. So these are what mean that, you see, if the teacher is a good diagnoser, in fact, and of course he knows how to diagnose things. Tests can be conducted, interviews can be there to diagnose a problem like a doctor does, right? So this doctor-patient analogy can in fact of course can be used here, that a doctor, first he gets history of the patient, fine, and through history and through different medical reports, he in fact tries to diagnose, and finally he prescribes medicine. Then again a teacher is a good corrector. So of course teacher is an authority in the class. Students come in fact and they learn that language under the guidance of that teacher. So teacher's role is also that he corrects them. But now the point is that how he corrects, in fact, or how should he correct them? Fine, that of course, there are many instructors, there are many, language teachers, when they correct their students, so that correction, in fact, you see, puts their students in the deep sea. So that's why the teacher needs to be very active, he needs to be professional while correcting the students. The teacher in fact decides on when to correct, right? The time in fact is very important, and also the teacher thinks how to correct a student. Should he correct the students there and then if he makes a mistake, or the teacher waits for a while and he waits for the activity to be over, and then in fact he corrects the students, and that correction can be done in public or individually, right, students? So that's why the teacher's role is very important while correcting, and particularly when he corrects adults, right? You see, in a language class you will find people about 40 years of age, about 50 years of age. You will find old babas in your class. You will find military personnel. You will find people from different disciplines. So they may be expert in their fields, but they come to learn language for various purposes. So here the language instructor, in fact the language teacher, must be careful, must be professional, that when to correct, how much to correct, fine, where to correct, fine, right? And all these things, a good language teacher of course keeps in mind. So this was another role of a teacher. So these were the roles that we talked about in our last class, that motivator, the good language teacher is a motivator, informant, conductor, diagnoser, and corrector. Fine, students? All right, let's start our today's lecture. Today we are going to talk about what? Stages of oral lesson. What are the stages? Have you heard about these stages first? No? For the first time you hear about these stages? All right. So dear students, when you teach, of course, the language, when you make a lesson plan for teaching, lesson plan is a new term for you. Yes, okay, we will talk about lesson plan in our coming lectures. We have, 4 or 5 lectures on this lesson plan, that what is a lesson plan, how to make it, and how to execute it. So dear students, there are 3 stages of an oral lesson, right? So what is it? If I tell you orally, presentation stage, right? And then practice stage, and finally production stage. So we will be talking about these stages in our next lectures as well. We have 3 lectures on these stages of an oral lesson. Today our lecture is on the first stage, that is presentation stage. So an oral lesson, in fact, right, which aims to teach new structures or functions, is often divided into 3 stages. When you teach language, what do you teach? You teach a function, right? Functional sentence, or you teach what? Any new language structure, right? Syntax. If you teach SVO, subject, verb, object, or you teach, in fact, first conditional sentence, or you teach present simple sentence, right? So what you need to do, there are 3 important stages, right? And the first stage is, of course, we call it the presentation stage. The name shows you present. What do? You present the new language item, the new function to the students, and then once you present, you make student practice, right? Students practice, in fact, that is the next stage. And final, of course, we have a stage, production stage. Maybe you might have heard about another stage, we will call it warm-up stage. That comes even before the presentation stage. In warm-up stage, of course, again the motivational stage, where the teacher prepares students, right, to absorb the concept which is going to be discussed. So these are the 3 stages of an oral lesson. The first, the presentation stage, next the practice stage, and finally what? The we call it production stage, when the students produce, right? So we'll be talking about these stages, of course, in today's lecture and the next 2 lectures as well. Today, in fact, of course, our focus will be on the first stage, that is presentation stage. Now, how these stages operate, this is very important, right? And these stages can be compared with the steps in learning to drive a car. You see, of course, most of you would be drivers. Most of you would know how to drive. So if I ask you to go back and see, how did you learn driving, right? So your reply could be, first, you saw that your instructor driving. You see, so you sit on that driver's seat, fine, and you watch the driver. And some of you may be good at that because you watch your father driving, you watch your brother driving, so you learn quickly. As compared to a learner driver who has never exposed to these things, right, who has never observed anybody driving. The children who see their parents driving, so they learn that driving quickly, as compared to those students, those learners who have never seen that opportunity, right? So initially what you do when you learn how to drive, that you see the driver, fine, how does he drive, and then you listen to his explanation, right? So this one is what? Presentation stage, right? In the presentation stage, you watch, right, the driver, the instructor, the one who trains you how to drive, right? So you watch him, and then he stops the car, and then he tells you what he does, for example, right? So that he tells you this is the wing mirror, he tells you this is the back mirror, then he tells you this is the accelerator, the brake, and the clutch, and this is the steering wheel, and this is the screen, fine, and then he tells you how to ignite, then he tells you how to set the mirrors, fine, and then he tells you, of course, this in fact rhythm between accelerator and the clutch. This is very difficult job for a new learner, right? He cannot adjust himself when to accelerate and when to leave that the clutch. Initially, of course, it becomes difficult for the learner driver, but slowly and gradually, when he practices that, so he starts learning, and then he finds other things difficult, in fact, when to press brake and all that. But once he practices a lot, so things become easy for him. So you can compare these stages with that, the steps in learning what to drive a car. So dear students, these three stages, of course, the first, motivation and mechanics are essential components of learning a language. I hope we talked about last week as well that the role of, while talking role of a teacher, we saw that motivated students learn faster than demotivated one. So that's why I gave you a clue that warm-up stage is important, so that motivation can be a stage. You can add to these stages that says that motivate the students, right? A good teacher, what he does, he motivates. If he motivates, so it means he prepares the minds for the learning, and if the students are not motivated, things would be difficult, right? So that's why motivation and mechanics are essential components of learning a language. Students should be motivated, and then mechanics with techniques. It doesn't mean that students are motivated, but the teacher is unable to present, unable to help them practice, and of course unable to help them produce. So it means mechanics is aside, right? So what we say that both motivation and mechanics, right, are essential. You need to be good language teacher, right? So mechanics is there. We cannot exclude mechanics, right? On the other hand, we cannot exclude motivation. Both are essential. What? Essential components of learning a language. Then teacher's motivation does play an effective role in helping students learn a language, right? So simple things I have already told you, that once you motivate, students find it easy to learn, and if they are not motivated, it would be very difficult for them to learn. And how can we motivate them? We talked about in last lecture that your personality, your competence, your confidence, right, your in fact commitment, fine, everything in fact does an important role in motivating the students. And then good language teachers, of course, they need to establish the mechanics of a lesson efficiently and to choose context and activities that will prepare students for language learning. It's really important, right? There are three things in this point. If you see again, the good language teachers, they need to establish what? Yes, mechanics of a lesson. That what is the lesson that you are going to teach? What is that is the flow of that lesson? What are the important parts of that lesson? In short, lesson plan that you have, right? So a good language teacher, what he does, that he prepares an effective lesson plan, and then he, while preparing that lesson plan, what he does, that he chooses what? Context, situation. And then he also thinks of activities that, of course, will prepare students to language learning. So three things, of course, are there that this point talks about. Lesson plan should be there, the context is there, fine, and finally the activities to teach that function or structure of a language. So now we come to the which stage? Yes, today's our topic is, of course, the presentation stage. So 4 aspects of the presentation stage. How many aspects? 4. Language item. Fine. The first aspect is the language item to present. Fine. In other words, we can say the language item to teach, or in other more simple words, what to teach, right? So which function of a sentence to teach, which function of language to teach, or which, in other words, which structure to teach. So that is the first aspect. Then what is the purpose of presentation stage? Why? Right? Why we need this stage? Can we do without presentation stage? We will see the purpose, and then the context, again, is important of the presentation, and finally procedure for presentation. So 4 things are there. What language item to present, in other words, what to present, why to present, and how, I mean where to present, which particular context to present, and finally how to present. Is that clear? I mean, what is the procedure for presentation? How can you present well, right? And again, of course, maybe with the stages we are talking about, and maybe you feel that, well, these are the stages, and you can have a better presentation stage, right? So like we discussed in the last semester as well, that the methods we talk about grammar translation method, we talked about direct methods. So all methods had some activities as well. So these methods were there, in fact, once you know these methods, and why we talked about those methods, so that we can see that how can we improve our language teaching, right? So is the case here, in fact, the presentation stage, that in our perspective, that these are the aspects of a presentation stage, and you can think and see, right, do these aspects work or not, right? So ये आपको देखना है कि क्या जो स्टेज बातें हम कर रहे हैं प्रेजेंटेशन स्टेज में, क्या ये आपकी लैंग्वेज टीचिंग को हेल्प करते हैं कि नहीं? Do these things help you in your language teaching or not? When you present something, what do you do? Right? And of course, if you follow these stages of you can see the language teaching, do these stages really help? Or when you teach a function of a language or structure of a language, if you follow these stages, can you be successful? Fine. These things you have to see, and of course, if you feel that these stages really work, you can in fact add value, of course, to your performance of teaching. So the first, in fact, mean the language item to present mean what to present, right? So this aspects of the, present, PS stands for presentation stage, may focus on any of the, for example, what? I, there is, of course, do you think? Right? I'm going to leave this class. What do you think? Right? Or, for example, would you mind if I close this window? Would you mind if I close this door? See what? Or, so, these are what are exponents of asking for permission. Would you mind if I pass by? Would you mind if I turn on this fan? Would you mind if I close this window? So these are the exponents of asking for permission, right? So this is mean maybe we are going to teach this what these exponents, fine. Or for example, leave the room, stand up. Maybe these are the exponents for what? For giving commands, for giving orders. Clear, students? So that's why the first aspect of presentation stage is what to present, right? In other words, what to teach. Are you going to teach students a function? You're going to teach student a structure, fine, or anything else, right? So these are what mean, like we talk about that this aspect talks about the what to present. Again, exponents of different functions grouped together in a natural sequence. Of course, there may be exponents for seeking permission, maybe exponents for giving permission, maybe exponents for giving directions, maybe exponents for receiving directions, clear? Maybe exponents for inviting people, maybe exponents for, refusing something, right? So different, exponents for, in fact, different situational language, or like inviting, refusing, invitation, giving an excuse, inviting again, and accepting, right? A structure, for example, impossible, or the third condition, for example, had you worked hard, you would have passed. Had you listened to all lectures in the last semester, you would have done well in your TEFL course, right? So this could be it could be a structure, it could be an exponent, fine. And one use of structure, the present perfect simple with since or for. Exactly, I have been teaching you for last 20 minutes, right? I have been teaching you since morning. Clear? So that's what I mean what to present. Either you are going to present structure or a function or an exponent, fine, or you are going to give them a situation. So that's what I mean the what to present mean what to teach, and examples are there in front of you. Second aspect, of course, of this presentation stage is the purpose of the presentation stage. What is the purpose? Right? That why we are having this stage. Fine. Without this stage, can't we teach? Do we really need this stage? So we must know the purpose of the presentation stage. To why we need it? To realize the usefulness and relevance of the new language and their need to learn it. Of course, you present, and this is again the need analysis of your learners is a must. Knowing, I mean realizing that this structure is important. Knowing that, would you mind if I close the window? Student need this exponent for what? Seeking permission, right? I mean, of course, telling the students that I have been working since morning, or I have taught here for 2 years. Clear? Present perfect with since or for, right? Knowing that this is really useful for the students. Or I did my master's in 2005. I did my master's in 2014. Clear? So knowing that once students would complete this course, they would be in an interview and they would use this expression. Or, I mean, past, in every, of course, day-to-day conversation, yes, you refer to the past and you have to use the past form of that verb. Fine? So, its usefulness is important. And again, relevance of the new language, fine, and they need to learn it. Whatever structure you teach. For example, when you teach tenses, so you must have seen that, of course, in language centers, they don't talk about all the 12 tenses, considering the need. Fine, but the focus is on the present simple. Yes, they have to use it. Continuous, of course, they have to use it more. Like being, then similarly even present perfect continuous. Come to past simple, of course, past, continuous, fine. But future, if you see future simple, in fact, all will be doing. Clear? So we do not talk about all the tenses, of course, in language the teaching, considering the need. Fine. We know that present simple, of course, we need this tense more than. We know that past simple, we need this tense more because of the utility of this structure. We know conditions are important because we need these sentences that, of course, we have to give conditional sentences. And again, here we have to see that who are you teaching, fine, and why are they here. For example, if you are teaching bankers, and you keep in mind that which kind of sentences they would need. So therefore, when you present a language item, so you need to know what to present, right? For example, you are going to present, past simple tense, a formula for the past tense. So again, you need to know what is the purpose of this. Why am I teaching this structure to my students? Well, students, so the purpose of presentation, we must keep in mind that why we are presenting that structure of language, what is its utility, fine, and then, of course, its needs for the learners is important. Again, when you, of course, talking about the purpose of presentation stage, we need to concentrate on the meaning of new language and where appropriate, its degree of formality, right? When you teach a language item, so we need to know that we are presenting this and what is the purpose of this, and while seeing the purpose, we need to know its appropriacy. Fine, and also its formality level. Is it a formal expression or it's an informal expression? So here, dictionary can help you because latest dictionary can tell you what the status of that word, status of that the structure. Either it is a formal expression, or it's a slang, or it's a derogatory term, or it's a taboo word. So that is again important, seeing the appropriacy, seeing its formality level or its informality. Then again, talking about the purpose, to pay attention to the pronunciation, stress, intonation and spellings of new language. Again is important, because what is the purpose of that presentation stage? Yes, because once you present that, you see, you try to pronounce it word, right? Because if you write a sentence on the board, so again you try to speak that sentence. You read that sentence for the students. Again, when you write that sentence, maybe you analyze that sentence. In fact, maybe you see that, of course, mean that what is the noun in this sentence, what is the verb in this sentence, what is in fact adverb in this sentence, or if I talking about linguistically speaking, if I say that what is the noun phrase in a sentence and what is a verb phrase in a sentence, in your stylistics, you will be talking about these things as well, right? So that's why when you analyze a sentence, you come to know all these things. So that's why when you have to, again, the purpose of this stage of presentation stages is to pay attention to what, not only its pronunciation, but also its tone, its stress. For example, when you talk about aristocracy or democracy, so you see the stress on the second level, on the second syllable, right? So that's why you keep in mind these things also. And again, the spellings of a new language, it's important. So when you present, right, maybe you speak or you write on the board, so you correct spellings. And how to find out the correct spelling? Yes, dictionary is a good source for spellings. And again, you focus on the grammar, its morphology and syntax of the new language clearly. It's very important. Another purpose of this presentation stage is that a presenter, and who is the presenter? Of course, the teacher. He presents, so he focuses on what? On the grammar, right? On the form of that vocabulary item, on the form of that syntax of that sentence, if it is a sentence, of course, of the new language item clearly. So that's why the purpose, these are what the purpose of this presentation stage. What is the purpose, my dear students? To realize importance of that exponent of that language, right? A function of language, a structure of that language. What is its appropriacy? What is its utility? And also, right, why students need it? It's very important. So needs of the students must be kept in mind. If a sentence structure that you are teaching, but you feel that, well, of course, there is no need of this language function, students hardly need it, or we hardly use that sentence in our language. For example, if you're talking about future perfect tenses, right, say, or future perfect continuous tenses. So if you see the use of those tenses, and if you compare it with for example, present perfect continuous tense or present perfect tense, so definitely the use of present perfect tenses more than you go on to future perfect or future continuous. So yes, the utility of these present perfect continuous and present perfect tenses is more than of course the last one. Clear, students? Fine. And then we also mean that we need to concentrate on what the meaning of the new language, what is the meaning. And again here, when talk about the meaning, you see, you consider that it's connotative meaning, and again it's denotative meaning. And you know that meaning, semantics we call it, that of course semantics is the study of meaning of a language. So when you teach, right, any vocabulary item to the students, so you need to consider what is the connotative meaning of this word and what is the denotative meaning of that word. So again, this will help the students to get it. And of course, because you are presenting, right, so purpose, this is purpose of the presentation, that which meaning we are talking about, right, and then also focus on the grammar, right, and the language clearly. So these are of course the purpose of presentation stage. First we saw that, you see, what to present. The first aspect was what to present, what to teach. Second what is the purpose of presentation. Then context is important. right? So third aspect of presentation stage is the context for presentation. Definitely we teach language in a context, and when the context changes, language changes, right? So context plays a very important role in learning a language, fine, in teaching a language. So what the teacher, a good language teacher, does, that he creates a situation for teaching. For example, when in fact the teacher in fact brings a dialogue between a branch manager of a bank and a customer, so there is a situation. Situation could be that, well, you see, the customer intends to open an account in that branch, in that bank. So then the customer asks questions, and of course that branch manager, he replies. So there is a situation. Or if a customer goes to a travel agent to reserve a seat, right, for a particular place, so again there is a situation. So to convey the form of the new language, is talking about context for situation. So whenever we convey a new form of the language, as well as the full force of its meanings and relevance, the teacher will have to introduce the language to students within the wrap of two kinds of context. I mean, we can have two contexts, right? How many contexts? Two contexts. It's very important. The first one is situational context, right? And then of course mean linguistic context. Now, what is situational context? Mean the situation, right? Is simply the situation language occurs in, right? Which situation that language is being used, right? What is the exact situation? Example is there, for example, like, see what the example is, situation, right? Example, buying quantities of food. So language can be count noun and count, in fact mean uncount nouns. We can call them as exact mean the mass nouns as well. Or talking with the bank manager, exponents of advice. I hope you understand. So language is exponent of advice. Could you please guide me? Could you please help me? Could you please tell me how to open an account? So yes, this is the language. And then situation is bank. Or you go to a Pizza Hut, and then you are a customer. Again, you request, right? You ask for, right? You order for, right? And then of course that Pizza Hut manager, he replies to you, right? So again we see the language and the situation. So this is called what? Situational context. So when talking about the context for presentation, so it's very important that you create that situation. So that's why of course good language teachers, they present things in fact so in a specific situation, and they create that situation in fact, right? And once they create that situation, we feel that the students in fact involve themselves in that situation, and they move forward well, fine, because they think themselves in that situation, and ultimately learning of that language becomes easy, right? And of course with this one, textbooks, videos or tapes can often provide ready-made situational context, but when these are not available, fine, so for any reason teacher can devise their own. Again, the teacher is a good designer also. He needs to design things, and we talked about in the last week that of course you can use realia, newspaper is the best force. I mean these days of course you have, we are living in the world of technology. You have different channels are there. You can record things, you can get things from different books, yes, and of course they are ready-made. I mean situations are there. But if you design, a situation in your own context, that would be better. For example, if you have a situation, of course, in our bank, in a Pakistani bank, for example, if a branch manager of a national bank and a customer, there is a dialogue between these two persons, or if you go to another bank, a private bank, so situation is different, and then the language that we need for that. So that can be local, of course, customized and localized situation. And of course, when you teach language in our country, of course, in Pakistan, so that situation would be better for the students as well. Second context, of course, linguistic context. Again, it's important. So what is it? It's the language surrounding a particular piece of language, right? That was earlier we talked about situational context. Now it is linguistic aspect, right? So what is linguistic aspect? It's the language surrounding a particular piece of language. Example, very simple. There is a boy and there are boys. Clear? So Ali and Zia, fine, are good students. Ali is a good student. Fine. Either Zia or Ali, fine, is absent today. Either Zia or Ali is absent today. Fine. So here I mean, if you say either Zia or Ali are absent today. Clear? So Ali and Zia are absent today. All the boys and a girl is absent today. Fine, students. So that is what mean linguistic context. Mean that the language that surrounds. Fine, the context that is surrounded by a particular piece of language. So for the presentation of new language, linguistic context should be meaningful, clear, and free from unnecessary language items. It means that when you present a language item, so other irrelevant details should be put aside. Focus should be on the item that is to be presented, and that particular linguistic context should be kept in mind. Linguistic context must be simple enough to reveal form, but rich enough to reveal meaning and remain a sample of authentic language. This is very important, right? That whatever language, when you're talking about linguistic context, mean that it should be good enough to what? To reveal that, to show that language, right? Talking about, for example, conditionals, talking about, for example, direct and indirect narrations, talking about modal verbs, right? Talking about use of need, right? So, that should be focused on, right? And when you talk about the models, then focus on the models, in fact. Talking about conditional sentences, then focus on the conditional sentence. They should be rich enough in that linguistic context. So that is very important in this stage, that is the presentation stage. And we talk about that the context is very important for the presentation stage. And context can be what? Situational context. What is the situation? And then it could be linguistic context. So important, right, students? So what is presentation stage? What to present, what to present, what to teach, right? And you need to decide on what to teach. Again, if I go to lesson plan, then that determines that which, what to teach, right? And then what is the purpose of that presentation? Why we are presenting that? And then what is what? After the purpose, what is the context of that presentation? Because language, of course, is in a particular the context. If context is not there, so it would be difficult for you to exploit that activity. Then what is the procedure for presentation, right? What is the process of that presentation? It's really important. So my dear student, the context a teacher chooses for the presentation of a new item of language differs from each item, but the procedure used for presentation is, by contrast, fairly standard. It usually includes some important points. Clear? So there is an order. As far as the context is concerned, we discussed that every new item requires a new context, right? For example, talking about situational context. You see, when you talk about advice, it can be in a bank, it can be in a of course in a law firm, it can be of course you can go to a doctor, you can get a second opinion of a doctor. So situation is different. Again, linguistic context, of course, definitely when you teach the models, you teach in fact negatives, you teach in fact functions of sentences, you teach in fact structure of sentences. So linguistic context is different. But when you're talking about the procedure of presentation, so we can have a standard procedure for presentation. So first of all, when you talk about procedure of the presentation stage, the first point that is important is build up the situation. Create a situation, right? For example, you can give a controversial statement when you want students to in fact give their views. So again, initially you come to the class and you give a topic. When you want students to give arguments, so you give in fact a debatable topic to the students in fact. Clear? So that's what we do, that good teacher creates a situation. And this can be done through the use of pictures, dialogue, a tape, chatting, a board story, and etc. Right? So first of all, when you talk about procedure, we need to build a situation. We need to create a situation, and for that we can use board. Right? For example, on the board you can write a story, or you can bring a picture. You can show the picture to the students. And really, of course, the picture is better, because people say that one picture worth 1,000 words. When you show a picture to the students, all eyes on you, and people start thinking about the picture, and they start thinking of course, in that situation. Some of the students, they imagine themselves in that situation, right? And of course, they work also on the linguistic context of that, and then what situational context is important. So this is very important, that you need to build the context, right? Because if you build that context, if you create that context, then you see you start thinking of language item for that situations, right? For example, when you are talking about a dialogue between a travel agent and a customer, so of course you will talking about ticketing, you will talking about air travel, you will be talking about fare, you'll be talking about high fare, you're talking about the low fare, and again you're talking about the way, in fact, which in fact a plane to follow. Should we take a direct flight to your destination, or should you take another indirect flight? So that's why it depends, right? So what we do, we create a situation. Or if you're going to teach about grocery items, right? So then situation is different. You can give them a list of grocery items, or you can show them a picture of a store, of a grocery store, where there are lots of things are there. So that's why when you have to present something, as far as procedure of presentation is concerned, that first you need to create a situation. And again, when you create a situation, you need to keep in mind the level of your audience, right? And if you create a situation that it is out of the reach of the students, that would be difficult for the students to understand. For example, if you are teaching students here in the local the context, and if you give example of a Walmart, for example, so for that, it doesn't mean that you cannot give that, but for this, students in fact need to know much about Walmart. However, if you are teaching business graduates, business students, so they have read a lot about Walmart, so they would be able to go with this situation. But for those who have never heard this name, right, Walmart is a new name for them, and it would be difficult for them to involve themselves in that situation. So dear students, that create the first thing, as far as procedure is concerned, build a situation. For this, a dialogue can be given, fine, or any tape recording can be used. For example, you can listen and guess what is it, fine, or another thing, a handout can be given to create a situation. So that is the first thing. Second thing is, in fact, as far as the procedure is concerned, elicit the new language from the students or tell it to them. Could be, once you have created a situation that we are in a bank, right? So I need to open account. It means you have done it. Or maybe you played, in fact, a recording where a customer, in fact, she's the National Bank of Pakistan, it's State Bank of Pakistan. So what is it? A situation is there. fine, or you might show them a picture of a bank, fine, and the customer is waiting on the gate, right? The door opens and the customer enters. Once you have created that situation and you feel that students have understood that situation, then you see, now elicit the what will I do? I want to open an account. Well, I need to ask somebody. I mean, one student would say, well, I need to see accountant. Yes, and they say, no, accountant doesn't open account. Then I need to see operation manager. Okay, you can see, but the operation manager may not help you. So what to do? I need to go to the front desk officer. Right? I need to go to CSR, for example. Right? So again, mean customer services representative. So the CSR, yes, right one, he would give him an application form. Or before that before giving an application form, that CSR would tell him the details. That yes, we do open this account and these are the terms and conditions. Fine, and if you agree with those terms and conditions, yes, this is an application form, fill in this form, attach your national ID, right? And I mean, this is a challan, of course, this is a receipt, you need to fill in, you need to deposit money to that, in fact, another word is teller, right? So you need to go to accountant, go to get that cashier, yes, fill in this challan form, fine, fill in it, all right, go deposit, fine, and then you will be issued, for example, an account number, and then you will be an account holder, right? So this is what situation, you see. And then, I mean, what you just said that, well, we are in a bank and you want to open an account, what to do, right? Or I need to buy the pizza, and what to do, where to go, for example. Clear? So dear students, this is what that you see, you elicit new language from the students, or tell them. You can tell them, or you can get language from the students. This is important. And elicitation involves trying to encourage students to produce language they have never been taught. Fine, they may well not be able to produce it correctly, but can nevertheless make guesses or call on outside knowledge. Is that clear? Initially, when your situation is novice, it is an innovative situation that they have never been exposed to it, so they would guess. They would guess, for example, McDonald's, and maybe of course students have, been there. Maybe there would be some students who have never been to McDonald's or KFC. So yes, they would guess what is it, right, as a fast food, fine, and they might ask others to find out what are the products of this fast food. So in this way, you see, so they would get, of course, they would guess, they would get information. So this is good where you elicit language items, you elicit sentences from the students, or if you feel there is no response, sometimes it happens that you see you create a situation where you feel that nobody has got it. People are not aware of that situation, and that situation is new for them. Maybe for the teacher, for you it's not new, but maybe for the student it's new, because you never know which kind of group is there in front of you. So dear students, that is, you see, that once you have created that situation, then try to elicit language from the students. So if they do successfully, they will be pleased. If not, they will realize there needs to learn it, in fact. Well, students, so that's what, of course, what we do, that we elicit information, we elicit language sentence, of course, sentences, or what that language items from the students. If you see we are able to elicit it from the students, we will find them happy. If not, you see, they would realize that they need to learn it, and they ask others in the class, or after the class they will try to get it. So then the next one is to focus the students' attention on the market sentences, right? Sentences which are being used. Now what is market sentence mean? Those sentences which are in. Example, placing an order, right? For example, parcel, home delivery, clear? Pick and drop, for example, service charges, fine, discount, Clear? So all these things, you see, once the student, would be in that situation, and if they could, they could understand the situation, they would directly, in fact, start thinking of these market sentences for that particular situation. And these sentences, of course, is the first example of the new language, and that students focus on and use as a model for producing their similar sentences. Fine? So, example, home delivery service, or parcel, dine in, dine out. Clear? So these market sentences or the marker sentences, they would be able to learn if they are put in that specific situation. For example, situation can be in a hotel. So once you create a situation where you go to a hotel, for example, or you go to a restaurant, so what you need to do, for example, yes, you place an order, you see that menu book, and you find, of course, what is for, the main course, what is for the appetizers, and what is for the last, in fact. Is that clear? So you come to know all these things once you put the students in that situation, and the students learn those sentences easily. And to get these sentences to repeat the new language, this can be done chorally and individually. Example, what are the service charges? Example, individually students can practice that, or in a chorus, how much discount should we ask for? Clear? So how much tip we should give. So in this way you can make students, in fact, practice those sentences. It can be in a chorus or individually. And check the students' understanding of the concepts behind the new language. That whatever sentences they are using, whatever exponents they are using, have they understood the concept, or just they are using lip service for that? They don't know the concept behind. Then you can ask the question. Fine, you become the customer and let the student be that the bank manager, or you become the branch bank manager and let the student be the customer. So in this way you check their understanding level, whether they have got that concept or still they are just trying to learn that. And students, of course, should be, a teacher in fact does concept checking to find out whether students have already grasped the meaning and that form of the new language. And also, students should be able to know different forms of regular verbs. Is that clear? So this way, my dear students, talking about this procedure of the presentation stage. So first, we discussed that, build that context, then elicit sentences from the students, all tell them those sentences, and then focus on the students' attention on that market sentences or the marker sentences, and then get the students, of course, to repeat those sentences and again check those sentences. Fine? So these are what important, of course, phases are there of this procedure of presentation stage. So first, context, then elicit from the students or give them. Third, focus on that sentence markers, and the next one is, of course, get the students to repeat that. Again, the student should be repeating that. And finally, of course, you need to evaluate, you need to check whether they have understood it or not. So again, the amount and time of course, the concept work required vary with the age, right? Again, as far as time is concerned, it's very important. It depends, right? On what? It depends, on the age of the learner, fine, and their knowledge, interest, and mentality of each class. For example, you are teaching students, of course, they work in a Pizza Hut shop. So for them, when you talk about these things, so it would be easy for you, and they would be easily, in fact, manage things. But if you're teaching those students who have never worked, so you might, in fact, give more time to those students. But if you're teaching to professionals, teaching to adults, people who are in job, so they, in fact, somehow they have an idea of these language exponents, language functions, so they can easily, adjust and you need less time on this situation. But if you are teaching to those students who are doing it for the first time, so you might require more time for it. It may or may not be useful to employ grammatical terms or do concept work in language 1 or have more than one concept work during a lesson. So again, talking about L1, right? It may or may not be, of course, useful to employ grammatical terms or do concept work in L1. I mean, yes, try not to switch over L1. If there is, there's no way out, you can do that. A teacher must make these decisions based on knowledge on the class. Is that clear? So teacher has to decide when to allow students to switch for the course switching or when not to allow the students for the course switching. So this is what, my dear students, is what procedure of this presentation stage, right? It's a very important stage for an oral lesson. In presentation stage, what we do, we present what to teach, fine, and then what is the purpose of presentation. While talking about the purpose of presentation, we saw that its usefulness is important, need of the students is very important. Whatever you teach, you need to decide on, is it really important or it's useless. If it is important, then you need to teach. And then what is the procedure of presentation? Again, it's very important part of this stage. That means situation you create, then you get ideas from the students, then you focus on the marker sentences, then you have students repeat those sentences and you also evaluate. And the time, fine, it depends what on the age factor, on the age factor, the interest of the students, fine, and again the time that you are teaching is important. So these are what very important stage in presentation. So today in this lecture we talk about the first stage. Earlier we discussed what are these stages are there: presentation stage, practice stage, and production stage. And then we talked about the first stage in the oral lesson, that is presentation stage. We saw that the different aspects of this stage, that is what to teach, then why there is a need of presentation stage, and what is the, of course, procedure of this stage. In fact, with this, thank you very much, students. See you in the next class for the next stage of this oral lesson. Thank you very much.